Hi everyone, it's Jeanette here from the Sewing Studio with something a little bit different for me. Anyway, I was handed this Dear Santa panel. It's Dear Santa by Primitive Gatherings, and you can see on the wall behind me, that's Snowman Gatherings 4, I think. Snowman Gatherings 4, because I know they've come out with some fabric ranges with the Snowman Gatherings before. And these are done, and I think sort of the original idea is that you do some red work or something on it, or do some sort of stitching to make a nice little panel. But it was handed to me and said, you know, Jeanette, do something with that, please, and can you come up with some ideas of what else you might be able to do with it? And as soon as I saw it, I thought, actually, for me, I would introduce a bit more colour. And how I'm doing that, and I'm just going to sort of pull that down a little bit, is I've started to put in some appliqué details into Santa's hat by patchworking it onto some fusible, double-sided fusible, and I thought for me that's an instant way of actually bringing in some colour into the panel. And what I would do with this then, once I've put the appliqué detail in, then I would probably add a border if I was going to add a border, lay it up onto some wadding, and then I would go back in and do any stitching details on it. And you can use any of your embroidery stitches. I mean, you could go round and just do a back stitch and do red work on it, like I say, even after you've added the appliqué pieces, but you can sort of decorate it any way you want. Now, my idea of putting it onto the wadding before you do any embroidery stitches on it is when you come to do the embroidery, you're also quilting it. So it's going to add some nice depth and dimension and texture to it as you're doing that, as well as, you know, embellishing it. Now, I'm just going to show you what I'm doing with this, because I thought this is the rest of his hat here. So you can see I've started here, and always the rule of thumb, and I know Anna's done a tutorial on this as well, is you start in the background and you have to sort of work your way forward. So you can see here, this ivy leaf here, no, it's not an ivy, it's a holly leaf. That's going to sit really in the foreground. So I need to put that on last after I've done this piece of Santa's hat. And it's going to sort of sit on top, and then we've got 2 bits here for berries, and I'm going to do some yo-yos to go on there, or Suffolk puffs. I'm going to do some Suffolk puffs to go on there, so we'll have a little look at how we do those as well. So as I said, because I thought this was quite a big area just to add 1 piece of fabric, I wanted it to be patchwork. So what I've just done is gone in with a friction pen, and I've just sort of sectioned off into sort of 8 pieces, excuse me, his main hat, and then this 9th bit goes under here. That's going to be sort of the shadow, the shade of his hat. And I've started to do some of this, so you can start to see some of the pieces here. And I'm just going to sort of make sure I get that on the right way round. So I've chosen a much darker red for that, because, as I said, that's supposed to be sort of like in shadow a bit more. So I've started to cut out the pieces. Now, I chose to start at the bottom and work up, because some of the pieces need to sort of sit under or on top of each other, but you could start at the top and work down. It really doesn't matter which way you do it. You can see here I've got my other holly leaf cut out, and I'm just using my sort of bits and leftover bits of fabric to sort of do that. So that eventually will go there, but that will be one of the last things to go on after I've done his hat. And I'm actually just stitching these down just with a little hand blanket stitch. And I'm just using, I don't know if I think it looks like I've used 1 strand of embroidery thread to do that in. And I don't know what that colour green is. It was just a leftover sort of bits of green I had from a cross-stitch kit. And the red I'm using is a DMC, and it's colour 816. So they're the sort of the 2 threads that I've pulled from my stash to do that. And as I said, I'm doing a hand blanket stitch. But you could machine blanket stitch it, you could just do a little machine zigzag, you could free motion embroider these down. You could just use a straight stitch on your sewing machine if you didn't want to hand sew them. So you've got lots of different options of how you actually secure your appliqué pieces. You could do a turned edge method. You could definitely do sort of a needle turn or any sort of turned edge method for this as well. And if I was doing that, you could either do it from, make yourself some paper templates, or sort of a turned edge where you sort of come up and stitch your piece of fabric from behind. So lots of different ways. I'm not going to go into all the different ways of appliquéing it, because we're using fusible here today. So let me just have a look at what we've got here. So that's my number 9 piece, and you can see I've sectioned it. I've drawn it in friction pen, so if I didn't like the shape of something, I could just iron it out and give it another go. I'm just going to put my holly leaf back there. And I've numbered these and I've numbered these. So you can see here where everything is beginning to fit. This is piece number 7, so that's going to go there. Now the one thing you do have to be mindful of if you're going to do this is you need to cover the lines. You don't want to necessarily see the lines after you've put your pieces down. The blanket stitch will cover a little bit, but not all of it. Right, that piece is going to go like that. And what I've got to remember is which bits, so that bit actually sits under that bit, I think. So I'm working up. That's my number 5 bit, so actually that goes under there. And you can begin to see what his patchwork hat is going to look like. That's piece number 8. I think that slides in under there. So you can begin to see what that patchwork hat's going to look like. So I'm really pleased with that. So I'm just going to take those away. Now you could secure all those down as one unit, but we'll take everything to the iron in a minute. I just wanted to, right, I'm going to leave that piece there. Yep, just to remind myself of what I need to leave. So if you notice here, I've cut this shape slightly beyond these lines. So it means that when I put piece number 2 and 3 down, there'll be fabric underneath and there won't be a gap. So when I come to cut 2 and 3, I'm going to trace the pieces out on the line here, but I'm going to cut beyond it there because number 1 then will need to sit on top of number 2 and 3. I hope that makes sense, and it will probably make more sense as I begin to do it. So let's grab a little bit of fusible. Let's hope this is big enough. And I've got my light box under here. Now because we're tracing it onto fusible, I've actually got to turn this over. Otherwise it would be mirror image, it would be facing the wrong way. So quick and easy, turn it over, and then I just need to check that I can see my lines through there, and I can. I don't know how well you're picking that up on camera, but I can clearly see my lines. So I'm going to get my little bit of fusible, and I'm going to see. Now I need to remember that we don't need to go beyond here, but we do need to extend beyond there. I'm going to draw on this line, and I draw to the outside of the line just that I know I've got it. Now one of these is going to overlap the other, so I'm going to go beyond my line and just do a dotted line because my number 3 is going to sit under my number 2 piece, and I'm choosing to draw beyond the line. Now you can always come back and add stitch detail if you need to. So if I sort of take that away and put it under the close-up-ish, you can see there where I've got dotted lines, that's going to be pieces of fabric that's going to sit underneath something else. Where I've got a straight line, that's where the piece is going to fit up to a line. So then once I've done that, I can take my scissors, and I love these. I've not long bought these, and they're Fiskars and they're spring-loaded, and they're brilliant for cutting out because you haven't got the same pressure on your hand. So I find I can cut things. Oh no, don't cut it out yet, Jeanette. Rough cut it first. Oh, it's getting carried away. It's getting all excited. Rough cut it first. Sorry. But I do love these spring-loaded. They're much easier on your hand. Right, there we are. We've not lost anything on that. Now let me just draw the other, or trace the other bits while we're at it. So my number 2, and now we've gone beyond that line, so I can draw on the line there. We've got fabric under there, so I can stay on the line there. That's the outside. So I'm going to draw to the outside of that red line there. And then this line is going to sit under number 1, so that's going to be a dotted line, and it's going to extend beyond there, but not beyond there. So that's my piece number 2. Let's just label that one. That was 3. And then I've got another little scrap here, which should be big enough, she says, hopefully, for our number 1 piece. And this doesn't go under anything, so we can just draw Actually, it does go under something. It goes under the holly leaf. So I am just going to extend beyond the holly leaf, but everywhere else is just a solid line. Now I can switch off the light box because we've finished with that. So now I've got some selections of fabric here. So they're just a selection of different reds. I think there's a red that I've used more than once. Right, so let's take those to the iron and press them down. Now I have got my fusing mat here. Now if I cut those smaller, I can do more than one at a time, but I'm just going to do one at a time for a minute. Now let's get my top piece of my fusing mat. Just make sure I haven't moved that. No. So this is thanks to Anna that I bought this fusing mat. I saw her using it in her Appliqué demo, and yeah, it's like, yeah, I definitely need that. My warning though with it, it gets really hot. I mean, it does the job, and I say it's not really a warning. Well, I guess it is because it gets really hot, so just be careful. But I love it. Like I say, it protects your ironing surface and it protects your iron. Just absolutely perfect. Now both of these I think I can put in because they're quite small. So let's just take the pin out because it's not a heat-proof pin. I do have some of those magic pins that you can iron on and they are fabulous. But that is not one of them. Just making sure I didn't move that too much. Let's just move that back. But yeah, I love this fusing mat. You've got this bottom silicone bit, which protects your ironing surface, and then this sheet that goes on top, which protects your iron. Yep, perfect. And I'm just going to rough cut this for a minute, just because it's going to be easier for me to deal with. Yeah, I really like the spring action in these scissors. Let's just flip our Santa over. So I'm going to cut on the line, and the trick when cutting, particularly if you're going around sort of a curve or a corner, is to move your shape, not your scissors. But because of the spring load action on here, you've only got to sort of take the pressure off the handles and it opens. I love it. So that's my number one shape. Let's put that over there, out the way. Now what I tend to do, and you know I didn't really need to, but when I come to cut the dotted lines, I sort of cut just slightly to the outside of it, just so that I make sure that there's plenty of fabric underneath. As I said, our blanket stitch will hide a little bit of the edges, but if you're not doing a blanket stitch, you definitely need accurate cutting. You can see the concentration on my face. Have I got my concentration face on? So I've moved everything over to the ironing surface, and I've got my fusing mat underneath still, and I've put my first piece down, which is going to go underneath, which is my number 9. So I've just taken a pin and I've just scratched the back of the paper there, and then that's a nice easy way to release the paper from the fabric. And I'm just going to lay that one into position. Now on my wall fusible mat at home, if I haven't got my silicone mat underneath, I do just pin through, but don't pin through your silicone mat because you will make holes in it. Right, number 6 and number 8. So my number 8, I'm just going to put it under the camera. You can see there's my dotted line, so I know that's going to go underneath these pieces. So you do have to just sort of make your own. So I'm just going to move that. And I'm just making sure that I've covered the lines. All right, let's put that one back. No, that one first. It's a bit like a jigsaw puzzle. And then that one's going to go on top. So when I'm happy with the position of all of that, I'm going to get my sheet and I'm just going to lay it carefully on top, and then we can fuse that down. Now I'm just holding this for a few more seconds than I would at home because of this iron. It doesn't stay hot all the time, so it needs your hand on it for it to sort of start to warm up again. So, you know, my iron at home, it's just a sort of normal iron, and it's hot and ready to go. I tend to hold it on there to about the count of 5 when I'm attaching the papers, and then probably for about 10 seconds. I think the warning is don't overheat it, because what happens is the glue can absorb into the fabric and then it doesn't stick at all. But you can see there the patchwork is beginning to take shape. So next I would put on my number 4 piece, I think it is. Yeah, my number 4. Oh, look, I'm beginning to erase my lines, but I think we can see it. So that's number 5. Now, if you wanted to do that not in a heat erasable, you could, because don't forget, it's all going to get covered. So you're not going to see it. But I would just carry on building the patchwork like so. So let's just stop at those 2. And then I'll just show you how I do the little hand blanket stitch. So I'm going to use the red. Now the rule of thumb is sort of about an arm's length. So as I said, this is my red embroidery floss, and I'm just going to take one strand, top tip, just pull straight up, and you won't have any knotting. Now I'm just going to put a little knot on the back. Now purist embroiderers probably wouldn't be putting knots in their work. But this is a fusion. I'm calling this a Christmas fusion. It's a bit of appliqué, it's a bit of embroidery, it's a bit of quilting. It's just a bit of creativity. So I'm just going to start by coming up right on the edge of where I'm going to do the blanket stitch. And then actually I'm just going to take my snips, and this is where I normally have my little pair of embroidery scissors, but these will do it. And I'm just going to take away those 2 loose threads. So I've come out right on the edge, and I'm just going to so this is going to be sort of the base of the, so you just push the needle, and then that bit of thread goes under the needle, and then that's your first leg. Now I then hold that piece of thread out the way with my finger, come along, and we're trying to keep the length of the stitch roughly the same, and the distance between the stitches roughly the same. So let me do that again. So I'm coming round, I'm going in at the base of the leg, and then coming out right on the edge of the fabric. And then you just keep going along. Like I say, it's very relaxing, it's very therapeutic. Let me just do a couple more and then I'll stop. So then I would just go round all the appliqué shapes with my hand blanket stitch. So here I wouldn't do there because there's going to be another piece. So I would attach all the pieces first and then just stitch down any of the edges. Okay, so that's just a nice little blanket stitch. Now, while we're here, I'll keep those out because I might need them again. Let's have a look at the little yo-yos. So I use this little yo-yo maker. You don't have to, of course. You can just make a little cardboard sort of circle. But I find these really easy, and it makes, let's move all of that out of the way. It makes these really perfect little shaped yo-yos. And I really like them because they've got a nice little turned edge. And that, when I've done this, and I've left my thread there so it's ready to sew straight on, I'm going to put on top of my hat there with maybe a little red button in the centre as well. So let's have a quick look how we make these. And this is clover. They come in different sizes. This size is the small, and it gives a finished 1 1/4 inch, which is 30mm little yo-yo, which is the size of that one. And it's just got the 2 parts to it like this. And I'm just going to grab a bit of thread. Now I'm going to go for this sort of ready looking one because I think that will mix in. Now I give myself a nice, and this is just normal sewing cotton. Now I'm just going to get a normal sewing needle, that one, and thread it. And if you want a bit more, I did a little tutorial on different hand stitches and how to do the quilter's knot, and we'll put a link to that for anybody interested in having a look at that in a bit more detail. Now I take this sort of solid piece and I'm just going to draw around it. Just going to draw around that circle. And then I'm going to cut out that circle, but I'm going to cut outside of that line, about 1/4 of an inch outside that line all the way around. And it doesn't have to be a perfectly cut circle at this point. There we are, so we've got that. And now I'm going to take my needle and thread, and I'm going to put that fabric face down. Now on this, I'm just going to turn it over. You've got like these 3 little nubs that sort of stick out. And I'm going to put it so that the one that at sort of 12 o'clock is up there, and then you've got the 2 there, and they correspond with marks on this second piece. Now I'm going to put that in fairly centrally, and then I'm going to click that piece in, hopefully lining up those lines, and you'll sort of hear it click in. There we are. And then what I've got is excess bits of fabric all the way around. Now it doesn't really matter where you start, but I start underneath, and you can see got these little cutouts. So I'm going to start the bottom of one of those and come up from underneath. Oh, that's the top one. Let's move it. And then our first stitch, we're going to go down. So you can see I've come up at the bottom there, and I'm going down there. And then round the back, I'm going to move up to the next one. So I'm coming up there, and then I'm going to take the needle and go down there. And each time I'm doing that, this excess fabric we've got on the back, I'm just folding it over, so we're stitching into it. So let me just quickly whiz round. Now I'm back at my starting point. So I'm just going to do one more stitch, and we've gone all the way around. And I've made sure that I've gone through the fabric with it folded. We're then just going to pop that centre out again. I can take the needle off at this point. And then I'm just going to take out that centre piece. And then we can just use that thread and just draw it up. And I just make sure it all folds in nicely. And once I've got it like that, I'll just take that tail and I'll just put that back through to the back. Now I would just fiddle with that a little bit more just to get all of those tucks all just sort of nicely laying the same way. But that's how you make the little yo-yos. So that's my starting point for this particular panel. Like I say, we've got the snowman version as well, which I was looking at his scarf. You could do some wonderful patchwork pieces and bits and pieces on his scarf. And then, of course, on that one, you've got all the lovely snowflakes where you can bring in all your nice embroidery stitches. Now, I've got several resource books, but this is a really good one, step by step, because I'm not very good at visual information. But I find this one's really quite a nice one to sort of follow. So it's definitely one of those things where you can have some fun, you can use some different techniques, like I say, bring in your embroidery stitches, but I would definitely do the embroidery bit right at the end, and I would do it through wadding, so you get some nice texture while you're doing it at the same time. Now, just one other thing I thought I would just share with you just before we finish. When it comes to areas like the pom-pom, the tassel on is, you can see I've already begun to draw in some lines. Now, what you could either do is sort of quilting those areas to give it some texture, but I would probably take some different whites and do some more applique on the bobble, but use these sort of shapes, and you can see I've just sort of drawn in, I've just followed the lines, so I would have that as a shape, and that as a shape, and that as a shape. So you're just sort of creating some depth and dimension, but by following what's already printed for you on the panel. The same with the beard. You could either sort of take some sections out and maybe put some grey bits of fabric in, or you can just quilt in those areas or embroidery stitch in those areas, just to give it like a nice flowing beard. But I would definitely follow the lines that are in there, because you would get that nice movement in the stitching as well. So lots of different ways you can have a look at it. You know, you don't just have to stick to sort of the red work as it's printed. Like I say, once I'd done that, I'd probably trim it, make a border, layer it, and then do all my final hand stitching embellishments. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it's given you a little bit of a different idea of how to look at something like this and to think about it a little bit differently, almost like a blank canvas for you to build some colour on, rather than just seeing it as sort of a pure stitchery panel. So I hope you've enjoyed that. I hope it might have sparked a bit of sort of creativity, inspiration in your own minds. I would certainly have lots of pleasure and fun sort of working on this. Like I say, definitely a Sunday afternoon sort of stitch. So thank you for this. Hope you'll join us again here next time in the sewing studio.